Verdens største religion, kristendommen, med rundt 2,3 milliarder tilhengere, oppstod nettopp i Midtøsten. Helt frem til 600-tallet etter Kristus dominerte kristentroen hele Midtøsten-regionen. Det siste tiåret, og særlig etter USAs Irak-krig i 2003, har det pågått en stadig destabilisering der intolerante, totalitære islamistiske grupper, ofte med tilknytning til Saudi-Arabia, har florert. Midtøstens kristne minoriteter utsettes i dag for så betydelige forfølgelser at man snakker om at hele kristentroen er i ferd med å bli utryddet fra regionen. I'm here with Juliana Taimoorazy. You are the founder and president of the Iraqi Christian Relief Council that has work in Iraq, of course, and also in Syria, from which we hear about horrible atrocities these days, and as well as Lebanon.
Yes, thank you for having me. For many in the West, people think that the genocide or this massacre started against the Christians in the Middle East just as of maybe a couple of decades ago, when in fact, since the rise of Islam, you mentioned the Assyrian nation, the Assyrians, also known as Chaldeans and Syriacs, have been plagued with massacres since the rise of Islam every 45 years, from the rise of Islam until mid-1800s. Beyond 1800s till today, every 11 and a half years, our people have been massacred, which means every generation has been inflicted with this. I was inflicted with this, my mother was inflicted with this, her mother was inflicted with this. And there are about 4 million Assyrians throughout the world today, and every single family, every single individual will have a story to tell you of what Islamist extremists have done to their family members. This is not something new that we've been dealing with. In 1914 through 1918, many people know about the Armenian and Greek genocide, but did you know that the Assyrians have also been massacred during that time? 75% of my nation had been killed, and really the world does not know about that. The Ottoman Turks, the Kurds, massacred the kids, the children. They burnt women who were dead already, looking for gold in their bodies, thinking that these Assyrian women had swallowed gold. And this goes on and on. There were hundreds of thousands of people that fled on foot to Russia. Therefore, a lot of families have been born in Russia and then had migrated back to the Middle East. So this is nothing new for us.
It's strange, though, because in the West we seem to hear approximately nothing about these things that actually go on. And we speak a lot about human rights, and one would presume that human rights also should cover people living outside of the Western Hemisphere. What do you say to that? Why do we hear so little about these things?
Thank you for bringing that up. That's a very important issue. There are two sides to the story. One is the Christian issue, and one is the human rights issue. This has been completely a human rights violation. It's a human rights tragedy. But I believe strongly, because it's a Christian angle, there's a Christian angle to it, and because there's an anti-Christian sentiment on the West, people, first of all, look at the Middle East, especially probably prior to 10 years, Middle East was a black hole. Who cares what happens to those people? Let them kill each other. Let them take care of themselves. Their own state should handle them. And then now there's more interest, but the interest lies on behalf of Muslims. Let's help these Muslims. Let's help the Palestinian cause. And yet the Christian cause is greatly ignored by even our own Christians in the West.
It's a paradox to many of us in the West to see the way war really has exploded over the whole region, and even strange to see how the American invasion of Iraq really has resulted somewhat in a terrible civil war.
The Iraq-American war in 2003 caused about 1 million Assyrians, who are also known as Chaldeans and Syriacs, to become displaced. The attacks began systematically. The Islamist extremists found their way into this vulnerable situation, and they started giving Christians there 3 options. You either convert to Islam, pay jizya, which is a form of protection tax that non-Muslims pay during war, or leave. And if people didn't abide by one of these three, they were killed. In the beginning, they started sending letters to homes saying, these are three options that you have, you decide what you want to do. People didn't take them seriously. Then they started sending letters with bloody bullets in there for priests. And when priests would receive this bloody bullet in those letters, they knew they were marked and that they would be killed. And when priests started getting beheaded or burnt, the churches started burning. They started setting churches on fire. Our churches have been burnt over 80 times. Imagine that. The Assyrians are the first nation as a whole that converted to Christianity. And we're the indigenous people of Iraq. You know, go back to Jonah's time. Jonah was the one who went to the Ninevites and said, you have to repent. You're looking at me, I'm a Ninevite.
And you're actually speaking Aramaic, I understand.
We do. There are about 4 million Assyrians, also known as Chaldeans and Syriacs, who still speak Aramaic, but we're on the verge of extinction. So I want to put this in perspective for yourself and your audience, that the same people that you read about in Old Testament, they're still alive, but now they're being persecuted. So in 2003 and beyond, they started killing lay people, just regular people who did refuse to convert to Islam. So they would knock on the door and they would just open fire at the family that was asleep. Or they would knock on the door and say, with whatever clothing you have on, at 4 in the morning, you need to walk, you need to leave, or you convert right now to Islam. There were two crucifixions that technically happened in Iraq, one in Basra, one in another town. The Islamists went to this young man, 14 years old, and 3 times asked him, are you a Christian? Are you a Christian? And he said yes. And they crucified him. Imagine that. In the 21st century, a crucifixion.
It's very strange. And the thing is also looking at Iraq today and so many Muslim communities as well. I mean, for centuries, they seem to live so well at peace together with Christian minorities and Baha'is and others in the same region, but there seems to have been like a complete blow up of intolerance towards minorities in that region. Is that a correct perception?
Yes and no. I wouldn't say it's completely peaceful. It has been completely peaceful for Christians. They're based on studies that have been done since the rise of Islam up to 1800s. Every 45 years, people were massacred. Assyrian Christians were massacred. Armenians were massacred. And then beyond 1800s, it's been every 11 and a half years. But does that come from every Muslim? I would say no. There have been Muslims who have made a human chain around churches and have begged Christians not to leave, because Iraq used to be a beautiful mosaic of all these minorities and all this diversity. And today, prior to 2003, we had 1.4 million Assyrian Christians who live there. Today we have about 450,000 left. A majority of them have fled to the northern part of Iraq. So this has been completely a human tragedy for our people in Iraq. Our Archbishop, the Chaldean Archbishop Faraj Rahu, on March 13th of 2008, he was kidnapped for the 2nd time. He sent a message out to his people and said, do not pay the ransom money, because they had made it a business. They would kidnap a child, they would hold a family, they would hold a child as a hostage, and family would have to sell everything or ask for money from the West and get the money to release the child. So Archbishop Faraj Rahu said, don't let them make this a business any longer. I will die for Christ here, I will be a martyr. And 2 weeks later, after his kidnapping on March 13th, they found him poisoned through his nostrils, his body on the side of the road. I can go on and on talking about atrocities. There is a woman, 3 daughters that were killed within a 40-day period because they were Christian and because they were Assyrians. And the 4th daughter was kidnapped, but thank God she was released. Now they're in the United States of America. Now, I'm not advocating this by any means, but I will tell you, there was a Muslim man in Washington, D.C., we do a lot of advocacy work in Washington, D.C., who told me, you know why the Western media is not paying attention to you? Because your Christian men are not strapping themselves with a bomb and detonating themselves like a Palestinian would, for example. But we have been taught by Christ himself to love one another, to preach love. And our people are not of militia. They're not equipped with weapons. They have all we want in Iraq and throughout other parts of the region, to live side by side with our Muslim neighbors. And that's all we ask. We don't want to be treated as specials. We just want to be recognized as citizens of that country, especially that we are the indigenous people of that land. Assyrians are the children of Sumerians, Akkadians, who gave alphabet to the world. And yet today, this human tragedy, no one talks about that in the West.
Under sekulære Saddam Hussein var kristne langt mer respektert. Tariq Aziz var landets kristne visepresident. Han støttet en sekulær, arabisk nasjonalisme skapt av syriske kristne, som ønsket å tone ned religiøse og etniske motsetninger. Det er så mange detaljer om andre kulturer vi ikke har kunnskap om. Og mediene forteller i stor grad om geopolitiske maktkamper, om olje og kontroll. Hensynet til de sivile lidelsene man påfører befolkningen uteblir. Etter invasjonen i Irak i 2003 eksploderte overgrepene mot kristne. Lidelsene er ubeskrivelige.
The Assyrians are also known as Chaldeans and Syriacs. When someone asks me, so what nationality are you? You look Greek, you look Hispanic, you look Italian. I say, I'm an Assyrian. And usually people say, oh, so you're Syrian. We're so sorry about what's happening in your country. And I always say, no, we're not Syrian, we're Assyrians. Assyrians are actually the indigenous people of Iraq. Our kingdom is expanded from northwest part of Iran all the way to Egypt. And our calendar is 6,764 years, which is unbelievable. The next oldest calendar is Hebrew calendar. We contributed greatly to civilization. The cuneiform came from the Sumerians, and we're the children of Sumerians. We speak Aramaic, the language of Christ. There are about 4 million Assyrians throughout the world today, again also known as Chaldeans and Syriacs. We're Christian. We are among the first nations who converted to Christianity as a nation. Until today, we're being persecuted in Iraq and Syria, Lebanon, and Iran for our faith. We refuse to denounce Christianity.
Where does one find Assyrian Christians or Assyrians in the Middle East today?
Today they are in northern part of Iraq. There are some left in Baghdad. In Iran, we have about 10,000 Assyrians left in Iran. Compared to 1980s, we had over 100,000, 150,000 Assyrians there. There are many in Syria, Lebanon, and they're devastated with what's happening today. And because of all the events that have been happening within the last few decades, many of them have migrated. You'll find many of them in Sweden, in America, in Australia. So we're really spread throughout the 4 corners of the world.
We often look back at the American invasion of Iraq, and it's such a paradox that it seems to have turned into such a civil war. in that country, and now with the spillovers from Syria as well. How is that affecting the Assyrian population in that country?
We're completely devastated. Our churches have been bombed over 80 times in Iraq alone. There are 12 nuns that were kidnapped, Syrian Christians that were kidnapped just recently, not long ago. Our bishops, our archbishops have been killed. Our kids have been murdered, kidnapped. There's so many that are lost today. And what is important for you to know is that we are on the verge of extinction. By us migrating to the West, we assimilate with non-Assyrians and we marry non-Assyrians, which is great. I'm all about assimilation, but without losing our identity. And our language, we're losing our language. Our children are not speaking our language. We will be the next Mayas and Incas. This is a human tragedy, and the world is not paying attention to it because, number one, they don't know who Assyrians are. They don't know what their plight is really. They know us as Iraqi Christians or Iranian Christians, if you will. But it's very important for the world to know that these ancient people, Ninevites, you're looking at a Ninevite. I'm the same person, I'm the children of those people that Jonah preached to. So it is important for people in the West to know that there's a human tragedy just underway today, that a nation is on the verge of extinction. What is so sad in our case is that the world really has remained silent on the Christian issue, right? But before we were Christians, we were Assyrians. We invented lock and key system. We invented irrigation that we're all using today in the world with the farmers, you know, those were all Assyrian inventions. The first cities were invented by the Assyrian people. And so many people thought that the Assyrians died in the Old Testament, and yet we're alive, thriving, you're looking at one.
Assyrere, kaldere, syriak, iranske troende, koptere, arabiske kristne, som etterkommere av de som levde på Jesu tid, arameiske kristne, melekitter, tyrkiske og palestinske kristne. Det et helt lappeteppe av fargesterke grupper som har levd side om side med muslimer her i århundrer. I møte med den salafistiske ideologien og den moderne islamismens brutale intoleranse mot annerledestenkende, står de nå overfor folkemord. I Midtøsten var 20% kristne ved begynnelsen av 1900-tallet. I dag det knapt 5% igjen. Og dette angår oss. Og mye av den samme islamistiske intoleransen mot kristne og andre minoriteter nå i ferd med å bli eksportert til både USA og Europa.
It's very important for you to know that the Christians who are stuck in Syria, in Lebanon, and Jordan, they're having a really hard time to get to the West. They give the government, these governments or UNHCR, gives by droves many more visas to non-Christians than to Christians. So number one, Christians are struggling by being stuck in these countries that they're considered refugees. They're unable to get educated adequately or work. They don't have work permit, right? So when they go to the West, when finally they're lucky enough to go to the West, they arrive there and they're completely shocked because they're being, many, not all, but many are given housing that are not adequate. I've seen myself basements that with broken glass, roach infested, that an attorney whose husband was killed because he was a Christian in Baghdad had to live there. Or, I mean, the stories go on and on. the one thing that they're grateful for, and that's very typical of an Assyrian culture. When you ask them, how are you? The first thing they say, thanks be to God we're alive. Thanks be to God we're here, right? So they're a grateful nation. So when they come to the West, they want to work. They want to learn the language. They want to assimilate without losing their identity. So it's very critical for these Western countries to be able to create an environment for these refugees when they arrive, to help them educate them in different languages, Swedish, English, German, and create opportunities for jobs for these people so they can pull themselves with their own bootstraps, so they can build good future for themselves. I was a refugee myself. I pulled myself up with my own bootstraps. And I advocate great citizenship in these Western countries that these refugees can have someday.
Thank you very much for speaking to us about these important topics. Juliana Taimoorazy.
Thank you.
Det er på tide å bidra til fred I Midtøsten. Ikke støtte mer krig. Det er på tide å stanse finansieringen av jihadistgrupper. Denne kyniske utnyttelsen av unge muslimer og indoktrineringen av disse som soldater I islamistenes vold. Hundretusenvis av kristne og millioner av muslimer har flyktet fra Midtøstens krigszoner på vei mot nye land som de egentlig ikke ønsker å flytte til. De vil hjem. De vil være I sine egne land. De brutale forfølgelsene skjer I dag uten at vi I Vesten omtrent reagerer. Hvorfor tier vi? Bryr vi oss ikke om andres lidelser? Det du har gjort mot en av mine minste små